Okay, welcome everybody. Today I'm going to be talking to you about our paper, Can't Touch This, Rethinking Public Technology in a COVID-19 Era. So what do pedestrian crossings, ATMs, ticket machines, and elevators all have in common? Well, they are all ubiquitous yet essential public services that often provide vital services or safeguard against potential dangers. And like the majority of walk-up and use technology, these all require some sort of physical contact to use. Contact which, till early 2020, was seen as a routine and safe method of interaction. The touching of shared devices and resources can provide easy routes for pathogen spread. And in the early days of the pandemic, it was found that the virus can persist on hard surfaces for several days. We were warned quite loudly that we needed to avoid spreading it around by washing our hands and avoiding touching shared surfaces. So there's no doubt that the pandemic has really changed the way that we behave, and in particular, how we interact with people and objects, including these types of public utilities. And while more recent evidence has sort of concluded that touching shared surfaces is rarely the cause of infection, there's still very much a lingering fear of touching things that others might have come into contact with. This situation has really created opportunities for the development of technologies that minimize touch and contact-driven interaction with shared devices. Recent advances in AI and have enabled consumer products that respond to non-touch modalities. And there are lots of non-touch modalities out there. So speech recognition, gesture sensing, eye tracking, motion tracking, biometric sensing, and so on. But so far, the underlying interaction paradigms have not really been widely studied in public-facing settings. And as a result, we really just don't know how usable, inclusive, or effective these solutions are. So in response to this, we have two goals. First, we really want to understand what impact the pandemic has had on pervasive touch technology by identifying how organizations and individuals have dealt with the issues. And we then want to use the results from this investigation to create and deploy a suite of touchless interfaces that can either be easily retrofitted into or replace public installations entirely. So first, we wanted to investigate what the new normal is in terms of interacting with public-facing touch interfaces, and this formed three phases. First, we performed an observation study to understand how the devices themselves have been modified by organizations. So we visited a variety of public spaces, including shops, museums, restaurants, travel hubs, and so on, and recorded unique instances where we saw public technology clearly been adapted to change its original interaction. But we also wanted to understand how people might be adapting or avoiding utilities in public spaces. So we conducted an additional focus study on the simplest but most ubiquitous public interaction we could think of. In this case, the pedestrian crossing button, which is the epitome of frequently used, seldom cleaned surfaces. So we conducted an observational evaluation of a busy button control crossing. Finally, we undertook an online survey to better understand if and how the pandemic has caused people to change their behavior with public-based technology. So first to the device adaptation study, we recorded 88 unique interactions of modified interactive devices, many of which are shown here. And by far the most commonly observed type of adaptation was to simply turn off or cover over the system to prevent use altogether. That was a third of the observed interactions. Some have been retrofitted with sanitizer bottles or had regular cleaning sessions, but it was also very common for interactive devices to be replaced with prompts to use personal mobile devices as an alternative. So some tourist exhibits, audio guides, restaurants whose menus had previously been a touchscreen covered interactive devices with a QR code. But replacements that require users to make use of their own devices are inaccessible to less technology advanced users, those without smartphones or people with physical or other impairments, which is a major accessibility and equality issue. We also saw lots of examples of coin mechanisms being replaced with contactless payment methods, again, making things less accessible for certain sets of users. During our 3-day pedestrian study crossing, we recorded over 1,200 observations, and the majority, that was nearly 60%, managed to cross the road without ever pressing the button themselves, either by waiting for the traffic to die down or by waiting for other people to press it for them. We saw a lot of different behaviors in how people press the button, but this is beyond the scope of this talk. Finally, our survey of close to 120 participants focused on the interaction changes compared to before the pandemic. And the results indicated a clear shift in behavior away from touching public space interactions, which really reinforced our motivation to investigate more inclusive touchless interfaces. So we begin our exploration by augmenting two examples of public infrastructures with touchless interactions add-ons and assessing the viability and usage of such hybrid devices. So for our first example, we selected the common elevator button as a starting point. We created add-on hardware enclosures that registered a touch-free interaction seamlessly, which allowed us to investigate two scenarios: a single push button, which is normally found on the very top or very bottom floor of a building. Here, a simple wave in front of the motion sensor will cause a motor to turn and push the button underneath. And in this version, two buttons allowing both up and down travel on all floors detects an up or down mid-air swipe gesture, which will press the up or down buttons accordingly. These are simple example of quick, easy, and cost-effective way to adapt public space in technology. And during a longitudinal deployment of this, lots of people use the devices successfully with no training or instruction. And we imagine such retrofitting can be expanded to include other simple button interactions, such as pedestrian crossings, vending machines, doorbells, or other similar devices with relatively little implementation or integration effort. In our second retrofitting example, we focus on providing discrete feedback for touchless interactions. So in our elevator example, users lost the physical feedback of pressing a button. They still had confirmation of it being pressed via visual feedback of the LED indicators. But in some cases, for example, like here on an ATM, it would be very inappropriate to provide such conspicuous feedback. So in response, we explored the use of mid-air haptic feedback for a standard 4x4 pin pad using a grid of ultrasonic transducers. So now moving on to adapting. In this playful probe, we sought to adapt new technology that has been installed explicitly due to the pandemic for additional use of gathering contextual public feedback. So with this in mind, we built a prototype with two automatic hand sanitizer stations connected to a simple Arduino controller that can count the number of times each one's used by monitoring the existing signal from the dispensers. Users then select their response by simply placing their hand under the corresponding sanitizer dispenser. So now, with this new normal firmly set in place, we now have a really unique and timely opportunity to completely rethink how public interactions can be performed. So here we've created two further prototypes that do just that. Here we use facial recognition to detect expressions, in this case, a smile or a frown, as a hands-free method of public data collection. So much like the sanitizer stations, we ask them a simple binary question and users vote yes with a smile or no with a frown. And as a final step in this work, we opted to completely rethink how public interfaces can be designed to incorporate new interaction paradigms for touchless control. In this case, we're trying to replace public information or internet kiosks with a voice-driven alternative. So a swipe gesture turns on the device and users can ask a question and receive a spoken response in the same way as they would a common home smart speaker. So in summary, our investigations into post-COVID-19 shared technology use have provided strong evidence that the public are still very anxious about touching shared surfaces. And as a result, they're either adapting the way they use public interfaces or, in the worst case, avoiding them altogether. Further, the current minimal adaptations made to public utilities by organizations really are fraught with accessibility or access issues. In our view, then, it's essential to investigate and develop touchless interactions with public technologies due to both their ubiquity and importance. As a fast response to this challenge, we focused on 3 areas of investigation: retrofitting, adapting and replacing, and have created and deployed 5 probes to demonstrate the effectiveness of the approach. Thank you very much.